Ladies and gentlemen, good evening. Thank you very, very much indeed for coming back for a second bite. Tonight will be a much shorter presentation and then some questions as we go. I just want to reiterate the main purpose of us getting together, as I'm sure Simon would agree, is this is a session for coaches. If theoretically you've got any questions about what I'm saying about, not a problem. Please feel free to get in touch, and I'm more than happy to debate on what works or whatever. But really, the type of questions I'd be really keen to get are: how does this work? What does that mean for my practice, etc., etc. So, everybody comfy? Everybody's nodding, or they're asleep, which will I'll wake you in a bit. Okay, away we go. So, 3 parts to tonight. 3 ideas that extend and apply the ideas from last week. So assuming everybody has seen last week, I'll just do a quick sort of resume so you know where we're coming from. Pretty much the idea of the full coaching toolbox, the sorts of tools that you can use from the psychomotor and biopsycho side to actually put together why would I do what I do. In other words, the underpinnings of it depends. It's a structure for reflection, ladies and gents. It shows why you would and why you wouldn't do certain things. It's useful for that big 5 idea. Remember, we talked about the idea of, now, how could I do this? What alternative ways could I do this? Would there be other ways that might be better under certain circumstances? And there's this big long word, the declarative knowledge, as to where we go. So, this looks horrendous, but don't worry, because you'll have the slides from this. This I treat as a resource. This is very, very old, not as old as me, but it's certainly dated from sort of 2002, and we've tweaked it since. But what you've got here is pretty much a master's degree in motor control in 2 slides. So there's going to be quite a lot to it. I think the main things I want to draw your attention to, because this is something to take away and digest and play with and use. So like any toolbox, it's unlikely that I'm going to be able to teach you to use the hammer, the screw, the drill, etc., all in one bite. But the main 3 points, those 3 golden rules, which are the rules that were echoed last week, is pretty much as follows. If you want your athlete to be committed, well, this version's for drivers, never mind. If you want your performer to be committed, then you make sure that it's relevant to them. And my second bite this evening will be to show how it fits into their own personal development plan. Yeah, Simon, you really need to learn this because holding the stick the right way around is useful in hockey. Dave, you really need to learn how to do this because catching the ball is useful in rugby, for example. Secondly, we're driving understanding. We're really trying to make sure that the performer you've got is buying into and understanding why she or he's doing what they're doing and what it means. And then this final idea, which we talked about last week, is this: if you want things to change quickly, and there are lots of circumstances where you might want them to, then you make it easy. You make it mentally simple for the performer so that she or he can hammer it in. If you want to stretch them and you want good retention, remembering, and transfer, I can take this idea and I can use it over here as well, then you make it more complicated for them. So long-term development is best driven, for the want of another term, from high cognitive load, or you make them think lots. You challenge them, you get them thinking. Pretty much, I'm not going to go through all this, A, because Simon would throw stuff at me and he'd be right, and secondly, because that's not the point. What I want to do is just to draw out a couple of 3 examples from this as to how that works. So let's look at tool 3, demonstration. If I give an expert demo, if I show a learner this is what it should look like, then that gives the learner an idea that she or he can generate and say, right, so I should look like that. But more importantly, I'm looking at the demonstration and I'm trying to work out what it would feel like if I did it. So an expert demo is very, very good for saying, I want you to learn this quick, follow me, monkey see, monkey do, and this is what I want you to focus on. Rapid change, excuse me, rapid change, away we go. If you show them a coping demo, so someone who's at the same level as them, that's quite good for saying, well, if he or she can do it, I can do it. It's also quite good for the longer term development because it gives their brain something to think about. Now, he did it like that and it looked like this and that happened, but she did it like this and it looked like this and that happened. Ooh, okay. And they start to, it almost gives them some material to churn over. Excuse me again. You might even get someone to show them it wrong. Now, I think I mentioned last week when I started work with the Army Physical Training Corps, then all of a sudden we got to a situation where a tenet of their faith was the demonstration must be perfect. And they could not tolerate or understand the idea that you might show them how to do it wrong, or that you might allow someone to demonstrate who had some weaknesses. But in actual fact, that's quite good because, again, if I say, look, I do this, but this happens because I can't quite cope with this. I'm not flexible enough, weightlifting move, or I'm not skilled enough, it was a drop kick, or whatever. And showing them how to do it wrong can sometimes go, oh, okay, so that's wrong, and that's okay. And it gives them information to collect on. So demonstrations, we've got a range of skills, it depends, a range of different ways of doing it, and then away we go. Look at tool 7, you telling them how to do stuff. Some people really decry this as a tool, and they shouldn't, because A, it's been around since the year dot. Soon as cavemen could grunt at each other, probably in Essex accents, they could get to a situation where all of a sudden people could start going, oh, okay, that's how it works. So this is really useful. It's useful for the sequencing, you do this, then this. It's useful for the timing, because I can use verbal instruction. I can use my voice to pace what's going on, yeah? But it's only useful under certain circumstances. It's depends bit again. So again, here's another tool where under certain circumstances, if I want to give a lot of information, that's great. I can do that. I've got to be careful of overloading people, giving too much information. So I would probably keep to a maximum of 3 or at most 4 points, and that's my lot. But it's useful. And it's useful because it enables me to convey information very quickly. Moving on, feedback was something we talked about last week, and practice was another thing we talked about last week. Let's focus on practice. Tool 12, practice, the idea of using varied skills, varied practice of trying out this skill, then this skill, then this skill, as opposed to drilling the heck out of one skill. You'd mix it up. So if you're a tennis coach, you might do this shot, then this shot, then this shot. Or if you're a canoeing coach, you might go this paddle, this stroke, then this stroke, then this stroke, this punch, this block. You choose your sport. But the idea is that you mix up, you make more random, more distributed, more variable practice. Now, that's good because it makes the learner work hard. And therefore, if you go back to the golden rules of coaching, it will stress them, it will pressure them, but because they're working hard mentally, their mental workload is high, they'll actually learn good, they'll learn well, they can retain it, they can transfer it. They won't necessarily make progress as quick, therefore you would choose when you would and when you wouldn't use that technique. And at the top of this sheet is a sort of if you like, a quickie guide to, if you want short-term learning, if you want someone to improve quickly, then you would use an expert demonstration. You would give them lots of feedback. You'd give them immediate feedback. You'd consistently drill and practice one sort of thing, and you do it quite a lot. Whereas if you wanted the retention and transfer, you'd show them a demonstration warts and all, with mistakes in it, a coping demonstration. You might give them less feedback. You might cut it down. Remember the KR crutch, the knowledge of results crutch, that how was that, coach? How was that, coach? Hey, how was that? So that they start to rely on you for the impact as to what it felt like or what happened, as opposed to themselves. You might delay the feedback. You might delay it till they've had a chance to express, oh, that felt better. What do you think, coach? You might mix up practice or vary it. Let's try this. Hey, now let's try this skill. Let's go back to that skill. Let's muck it about. And you might spread it out. Your practice sessions might be more distributed. So pretty much what this thing gives you, and like I say, I'm not going to go through it, but I'll happily take questions on it now, or you can come back to me, is an aide memoir. It's almost like a summary of a few lessons in the use of tools in coaching for the biopsychosocial approach that you want to learn. I said it was old, just in case it might be old, but like me, it still has its uses. So when you look at this very recently published paper, which distinguishes the characteristics of super elite, this is guys who played loads and loads and loads of tests at international level in cricket. They're shown in the red line on their scores, and against those guys who've sort of been good county players, they're shown in a sort of the blue dotted line on this. The reference is free and it's given there for you. Now there's loads of things that you can't really do anything about as a coach, but I want you to draw your attention to the factors that are at 11 o'clock-ish on this sort of diagram, so top left. And what you see is that super elites had a higher volume of random and varied backing practice. They practiced lots and lots of different shots and they mixed them up. So there's pretty compelling evidence. And I mean, this is a paper in 2020. There are papers from 1970 odd, almost as old as me, that are saying that this works. So pretty much this is a very well established and what we would call in science a robust finding. In other words, if you want good long-term development, then to coin a phrase, you muck them about a bit. The practice situation contains a lot of variability. It doesn't necessarily mean it has to be game-like. So you can go in a net if you're a cricketer. You can drill passing or kicking if you're a Gaelic Games player or whatever. But you can mix it up. That's okay. It works. Nice little quote from a couple of guys who've done an awful lot of work in decision making and the training of decision making. When you start thinking about the accuracy of your judgment, is this the right thing to do? Or you ask your mate, or you ask your favorite coaching guru, or you go online and listen to some old fool like me doing a webinar, then what you've got to do is to think about the quality of the advice. This goes back to my "it depends" last week, by considering how well structured the environment is, what they call the validity environment in which the judgment was made. In other words, how well might the person understand the environment, and of course also the record that person's got of making good calls. And very often new ideas or unique ideas or big change ideas, that doesn't mean they're invalid, but it doesn't mean they're valid either. So what you need to do is to test, and hopefully when we get into questions, we'll be testing. So what does that mean? What's the implication of that? How does that work? Or even, are you sure? Are you sure that's right? So anyway, part one. Part two. We talked about this idea of biopsychosocial, the idea that you as a coach, yes, you're developing skills, what you might call the bio bit. You're also developing people, the psycho bit, and you're also developing them to work in a certain social context or social environment, the social bit. So this idea of nested thinking, literally trying to get 2 or 3 agendas running at once, is pretty useful. And it's important because if you only focus on one of those factors, you end up with a partially developed, a part developed athlete, as opposed to a much more comprehensive. And I'll show you some examples to see what you mean. Now, this idea of nested thinking can be you thinking in these multi-level agendas, or it can be you and the athlete actually discussing it. And the older or more mature or more sorted out the athlete is, the better it is for you to share ideas with them and all of a sudden be able to go back and forth and go, well, should we do this or should we do that? So they understand the logic of your decision making. Because again, the understanding and their commitment to it, if they're going, gosh, coach, that's a really good idea, let's do that, then that's great. Finally, the idea of nested thinking gives you this basis of setting a curriculum. And if you're working with younger athletes or you're working with developing athletes of whatever age, the idea of taking them through a progression is probably a good one. And this helps you do that. So what does it look like? You might look at the stages as being something that occurs in how early the athlete is into your sport. So you might say, I've got an agenda now which teaches them to hold the racket, the bat, the stick, whatever, the right way round and to be able to use it well. I've got a longer term agenda that enables them to progress through the game. And then of course I've got a macro or long term agenda that is me equipping them for long term. But it doesn't necessarily mean age, ladies and gentlemen. It means the stage and age of the athlete who's coming through your sequence. It might be what we can do or what we should be doing. So increasingly, sports have a big support team. Even those teams working with children will have parents, they'll have mates, they'll have all sorts of things. But what we should be trying to do is to get people to use that support team better and actually work through. So this, again, pretty horrendous diagram, but again, take it away and have a look. This is something that we've developed as part of our work, ongoing work with Northern Ireland Athletics. And it's the idea of you've got this, these nested agendas, nested like Russian dolls. One fits within the other, and that's how it works. So we can go from the top down or the bottom up. I'll go from the bottom up. No, actually, no, I won't. I'll go from the top down, just to confuse me. Here's an athletics coach working with an athlete, and like so many Northern Ireland athletes, a big aim for me is to be able to get into the Commonwealth Games, establish myself as a senior international athlete, and qualify for the Commonwealth Games. So what that means is that everything I do with my athlete, day in, day out, week in, day out, week in, week out, month in, month out, is focused on that long-term goal. That's what the athlete's committed to. That's what I'm committed to with them. So within that, there'll be a series of sort of middle-level goals, or middle-level structures. So at the minute, I'm in low season. I've got a number of things that I want to do to develop with this athlete as I get them through. And here are my goals. But all of those goals, all of those things there, as above plus in the middle column there. Simon, can you see my cursor moving, or do I have to wave my fingers about, or how's that working? Can you see that, mate?
Yep, I can, yeah.
God bless you. Thank you. Should have tested that in advance. Sorry, senile old. Never mind. But what you've got here is these are the things I'm trying to do at the moment. And those are my goals. But those goals are nested. They fit in to these goals here. So what I'm doing at the minute is what I'm focused on, but I've always got a weather eye of what I'm trying to achieve across my quadrennial goal. And then we go into a part of that. So here I am in this session, or this week of practice, which is around sort of week 12 or 13. And at the level I'm at, I'm now starting to build my athletes' confidence through understanding of what the heck's going on. So this week, I've been really, really working beforehand, focus on pre-performance routine, lower level events. I'm really, really trying to get my guy tied down so that she or he is very, very confident in their pre-performance routine. So this week, my goal is to embed imagery in preparation so that they go in there, they try it out, they can see themselves succeeding as part of their pre-performance routine. But of course, that goal, that's this weekly goal, is embedded, it's nested, within this overall agenda. The meso level, the middle level, and that, of course, is contributing to my long-term goal as well. So what I've got as a coach is I've done my planning. If I'm good, I've sold to my athlete what she or he wants to achieve in the longer term, so that everything we're doing, I might start this week by going, okay, Fred, this week I really, really want to work on getting your imagery skills really tight within the preparation phase. But they know, and if they don't know, they ask, and if I'm clever, I still tell them that that's going to fit in, because now when you've got a really well-established preparation strategy, then we can use it all the way across this training phase. And of course, that's going to be crucial when we get to the next Commie Games in Birmingham or in Delhi. I think if you're a shooter, it's going to be interesting. The travel will be bad, but never mind. If that's what's going on, then that's where you're going to be, and that's how it fits. So the nested planning is a good way for me to make sure that I'm meeting all my agendas, the bio, the psycho, the social, and also a good way to present to my athlete, this is what we're doing and this is how it fits. And of course, a belter of a way to design a curriculum if what I'm doing is taking a number of athletes along a pathway. So for example, we're just starting work in some basketball. This sort of nested planning for an age group coach in basketball would be essential. Troy, please note, essential for you then saying, what I want to do is to get as many of my players as I possibly can to senior international level. Therefore, whilst I'm going to play this season, these are the messages I want to get across. But they're, of course, nested within what I'm trying to get across in the next 2 to 3 years, which is nested within what they're going to need at top level. Okay, going through this quickly, so we've got plenty of time for question. Those two things will now fit together in terms of me making sure that my pathway, my progression of my athlete is integrated. And it's going to be integrated vertically. So as they go from, I don't know, under 14 to under 18 to 21. And it's going to be integrated horizontally. So there will be different strands in their life. So what they do in sport is paralleled and makes sense in what they're doing in school, is paralleled, or job, of course, if you're working with older, is going to parallel with what they do in their social life and what they do in their lifestyle. So all these different elements fit together vertically in terms of their progression as an athlete or in age and level, and then horizontally in terms of how all these different bits fit together so that they can end up doing the job. So again, the nested idea, but not just a longevity idea, but also a parallel idea as well. So let's look at the first one. Let's look at the vertical integration. This is some work we did with Vinny Webb when ex-rugby league, high-level coach, but then working with cycling. And it's the idea of what the pathway looks like when you start all the way through to top level. And there's probably 3 dimensions here. You can go at senior international level, my athlete needs this, so therefore I will cane the heck out of just doing that. I'm not going to do anything else because I know that that's what they need. Now, I can see certain sports clubs where they go, our style at the senior level is to play like this. So I'm going to spend the next 4 years, 5 years drilling the heck and training the heck out of my player so that she or he will fit that template. Or you might go, I know that my sport is a CGS sport, centimeters, grams, seconds. It's all very measurable. This would be road cycling. This could be weightlifting. This could certainly be any, throwing, time, anything with a time. Anyway, that's what I do. I just hammer the heck out of exactly what I need, and I know they need there, and I'll carry on thrashing it from down here. Now, there are pros and cons. I'm never going to turn around to you and say, that's wrong. I'm always going to say it depends, not because I'm a politician, God knows, and Simon will remind me of that, but it's how it progresses. So that sort of idea develops very specific performers. Their progress is very fast because they know exactly what they're working at all of these different stages, and they're going through them, bish, bash, bosh, 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 that's it. Yeah? But their adaptability is low, ladies and gents, because they haven't been challenged to do lots and lots of different things. So they're one-trick ponies, if you like. They can do what you want them to do, assuming you've coached it and trained it effectively, but their ability to adapt is not high. If I just think, for example, in high-level football, high-level football is mostly musical managers. I think the average life expectancy, job expectancy, I should say, of a Premiership manager is something like 13, 14 months. So the goalposts are going to move. The criteria that you're trying to achieve are going to move. So if you're trying to prepare a player, as we are, in professional academies to perform in rugby, football, or whatever at high level, it's sensible for us to build in a capacity for the player to adapt, to have experienced lots of different challenges on the way up, so that she or he can bob and weave and actually have a bigger vocabulary where they hit the top end. That looks like that. A very high, get technical again, a pathway with lots of ping-ponging. Now that ping-ponging from one idea to another might be that they have coaches with different emphases. So, I don't know, in football terms, at under 11, the guy really works on technique. At under 12 level, he's really hammering the heck out of running back and defence. Then something different, then something different, then something different. Now, what happens is, therefore, you get an athlete who's been subject to lots and lots of different demands, and she or he has been placed in these pressures and asked to meet this criteria, meet this criteria, meet this criteria. Pros and cons. It'll only work with very highly motivated performers, because less motivated performers will go, what the flipping heck's going on here? And they'll find it hard to carry on with all this sort of switcheroo stuff going on. The progress might be limited, but if you survive through that sort of pathway, their adaptability is staggering. So you go back to that cricket example I gave you earlier. Lots of those players will have come through this, will have been challenged in this one, and then another coach will have been challenged in this way, and this way. And what you'll end up with are people who are fantastically adaptable if they last. Is there a happy medium? Well, here, actually there is. There's what we call the Goldilocks zone. So what you do is you limit the ping-ponging, the variation, and you keep some variation in there, but the variation is just like the Goldilocks story, just right. And the variation is enough so that the athlete is challenged, so that she or he has to meet these different criteria, but it's not so big that all of a sudden they just can't handle it. Hope that makes sense. A couple of questions for you to consider. If you have a very talented player, will the Goldilocks zone be wider or narrower? The answer is it'll be wider, because they can cope with it. If a nail sticks up, knock it down, Japanese proverb. If you've got someone who's skilled, challenge them a bit. Let them experience the pressures of that. If you've got someone who is a little bit lacking in confidence or is less able, you can narrow the challenge. You can give them something that they can bite off and chew. So the idea of that Goldilocks zone, where the variation is set, is that you allow sufficient variation so that the athlete can feel like she or he's progressing, but you don't. But you take it to an optimum level where they're actually being stretched. Yeah. So you can vary the task. You can literally, you can say, instead of, I don't know, basketball, shoot from the free throw line, you can shoot from here, shoot from here, shoot from here, shoot from here, because that's what you have to do in a game. Yeah. You can play against different types of defense. You can play in different offensive systems. You can execute different skills. All sorts of different things going on, but you spread it out. Now, vertically, what that might look like is that pretty much the amount of stuff you focus on that's a growth factor, it decreases as you go through the pathway, and the amount of stuff that you see as being directly transferable to performance factors goes up. So one of many things that made me angry, I should get out more, was the academy manager of a certain Premiership football team bragging how proud he was that his team had beat, his under 12s, I think, had beaten another team 29-0. Couldn't see it. You know, if you beat them at under 21s 29-0, and they're the same sort of level of team, I can see it. But under 12s, for goodness sake, why wouldn't you change the team? Why wouldn't you give them more ability to grow from the process as opposed to thrashing the heck out of another team? So I think this is very much age and stage related, but it's also related to goals. It's also related to what you're trying to get out of the team. Personally, I would much rather, in that case, have mixed my team up and put different people into different playing positions and set them different challenges. You know, like, okay, you scored, you can't score again. You have to. So that we stretch them, we emphasize growth. But of course, I'm not foolish enough to think that as you get older and older, or as you progress up the levels, the importance of performance becomes greater. And I acknowledge that. So a vertical coherence is almost like a sort of it's a blending. It's a, what's my best blend to make the player, help the player develop in the long term, but as I get closer to the top of the pathway, to help the player perform in the circumstances that she or he's going to have to perform. What does it look like horizontally? And here's where I come back to my psychosocial bit. Good coaches are good psychologists. Yeah, they might not have the letters after their name, but they're good at getting inside people and working them out and helping them through. Now, the coach, therefore, is likely to be a leader. And that leadership might include some fairly autocratic, some fairly, hey, do it like this, as I said so, type of behavior. This quote is just sums up that. Yeah, the leader needs to set the standards, and the leader might sell those standards, but they really need to insist that they occur. But the coach's interaction with the players, because of that biopsychosocial element, will take all sorts of other skills as well. Listening skills will be crucial. Now, your style might not match that. You might be quite an autocratic coach. That's okay. That works. But you would sensibly have someone in your coaching team who's pretty good at this. You don't have to be all things to all people. Gosh forbid. Yeah? Because at any age, and I like this because this is actually from an article on therapy, on how psychologists work, but very, very much, whether you're working with children, adolescents, or enthusiastic adults, things can get very confused. And so offline, away from the session, or walking back from the pitch, corridor type conversations are an important part of your skill set that enable you to be able to then work from a psychosocial point of view to help your performer get things right. I'm not suggesting you're a psychotherapist. I'm not suggesting that if someone has, you know, major depression problems, you are necessarily the best person to work with it. I'm reasonably well qualified as a psychologist, but if I'm working in a performance relationship with someone, very often I might refer quite, you know, impactful but short-term problems to someone else. But what I am suggesting is that as a coach, you can have a heck of an impact on the psychosocial development of the athlete. And if you can't, because that's not your métier, that's not your skill, or that's not your style, that's okay. Just make sure there's someone there who does that. So What we then look at horizontally is that, is your athlete getting and using the same tools? Is someone giving them the same messages? So a lot of our work is in developing the psychological characteristics of developing excellence. This isn't just a psychological message, though. This is saying, look, there are a set of things that you need for success in sport that you'd also need for success in the other spheres of your life. And a good coach will sensibly, I feel, make links and talk to the school, or if it's an adult, not necessarily talk to the job, but certainly talk to maybe members of the family, and certainly look at the social setup in terms of trying to get things that are going on in this environment working in this environment as well. Again, the "it depends" bit applies, because how you decide to do that is that it's much, much better for you to get it pretty right across a series of environments, so the athlete is getting the same messages, as it is for you to get it very, very right in your environment and the rest go hang. This is you making sure that the athlete is getting encouragement, development opportunities, practice opportunities. They're building their confidence in their skills in the different environments that they work in. So away we go. Nice little quote from Dennis Bergkamp here. You want people to think what they're doing and why they're doing it, because that's handy. Anyway, that's my lot.